How you doing? I'm Kevin O'Hara for alcoholmastery.com. Today's topic is 6 so-called facts that everyone thinks are true about alcoholism. The first one is that everyone thinks that alcoholism, problems with alcohol, is a disease, right? That people have got to overcome, that it's something that's going to stay with them for the rest of their lives, and that it's generally part of their genetic makeup. For me, this is just nonsense. It's something that was invented in the 40s or 50s, sort of 50, 60 years ago, after Prohibition, and people are trying to get the drinkers into places like the AA. What happened after Prohibition was, during Prohibition, people blamed the alcohol, right? People said that there was something at issue with this drug being sold on a wide scale, that it was causing a lot of problems in society. And if you think about it, Prohibition was there for, there was a lot of reasons behind why people sort of went in that direction, where they wanted to ban it entirely. It's made out that it was just the maybe Christian fundamentalists, I suppose would be a modern word that you'd take for it, where people just said that it wasn't a Christian thing to do, or it wasn't something that people ought to do in their lives because it went against the values of society or whatever, But at the end of the day, when you look at the history of alcohol, you look at some of the episodes of alcohol throughout history, it's just caused mayhem and just pure catastrophe in any societies where it's been taken on as a cultural thing. Look at the Indians, look at the Irish, look at the Italians, it's embedded into these cultures. It's embedded into most cultures in our Western world now. And after Prohibition, you could no longer blame the alcohol because, Prohibition caused so many problems in itself. Not only was it the rise of some of the biggest gangsters that the world has ever seen on both sides of the law, but there was no real push from the governments to enforce Prohibition. So it was just emasculated from the time of its inception, and there was a lot more problems caused by the imposition of, when somebody tells you can't do something, then it's going to cause, especially when it's something which you're used to doing, then it's going to cause a lot of problems. So, that's the history of, part of the history of Prohibition, and how after Prohibition you couldn't demonize alcohol anymore. You couldn't say it was the fault of a drug, the fact that this drug was in society. You had to switch over to the people, and that's just what happened. It was no longer a cultural issue. It was no longer the fact that alcohol was sold in a society, but it was the fact that it was the individual's responsibility. Now, having said that, I agree with a lot of this, right? I think that it is a personal thing. If you've got a drink problem, it's down to you to put the alcohol into your mouth, and it's also down to you to stop putting it into your mouth. But they took it one step further, and they said that it wasn't the fault of the individual, right? So it was the fault of the disease, that these people who started drinking alcohol had a disease, or they had a genetic disposition, whatever it was. But it's just nonsense, and it takes away the power, which is the second thing, right, that I wanted to talk about. Second fact that people say, that if you're an alcoholic, that you're powerless over the substance. I mean, it's written in AA's, whatever their 12 steps, that you have to admit that you're powerless to do anything about this. And think about it, once you start admitting that kind of thing to yourself, right, once you start admitting that you have no power over this inert liquid that's sat in a bottle that cannot do you any harm until you physically pick the stuff up and physically put it into your mouth, mouthful after mouthful. Once you start admitting that you've got no power over it, then what does that do to your chances of quitting drinking? You know, it doesn't do that much, does it? You know, it doesn't sort of fill you up with hope that you can do this on your own. It doesn't fill you up with any kind of self-confidence that is within your abilities to stop this stuff. So if you're powerless, then you've got to rely on something outside of yourself, an external power, you know, and that might be God in the case of AA. It could be relying on going to a dry out clinic, you know, spending fortunes going to these places, who basically use the AA formula anyway, the 12-step programs anyway, as part of their system. You know, they I mean, basically when you go to these places, it's like staying in a hotel, so you're paying for the hotel. They take everything off you. You know, that you're not allowed to bring booze in, obviously, that's a good thing. But then they put you through a 12-step process, and oftentimes that 12-step process is not even on the premises of the dry out clinic, right? You have to go outside to get that. So, you know, anyway, that's a different thing. But, you know, as soon as you start saying to yourself you're powerless with this thing, then it's a big problem for you. So that's another myth. Everyone's got the power. You have the power to do it. I mean, regardless of whether you go to a 12-step program or you go to a dry out clinic or whatever method you have to do this, it relies on you to actually do it. You know, because you could stay a month in a dry out clinic, and then you come out of the dry out clinic, and does that mean you're not powerless anymore? That just because you've gone to this place that you're not powerless, or just because you go to a weekly meeting in an AA meeting that you're all of a sudden it's giving you the power to do the things, you know? You have to take the decisions to either drink or not to drink. You have to make the choices. You have to take the actions of not drinking, right? Or drinking. So it's within your power to do this, you know. It's up to you to actually do it. You know, on step 3, the myth of you can't quit this on your own. How many people did I hear saying that before I quit? Before I actually stopped. And, you know, I was living proof that I could do it for 10 months. But when people say to me, well, yeah, you can't really do this on your own. It's dangerous to do this on your own. Or, you know, in the long term, you're still going to be sort of hooked. And, you know, it's something that it's impossible for you to do. Then you start thinking in the back of your mind, maybe it is, you know. Maybe that 10 months that I did, maybe the reason I went back on it in the first place was because I really can't quit it on my own. But I'm well into my 5th year now, and I will never go back onto alcohol again. So I never went to anyone. I never got any help off anyone. I did this completely on my own, without any help, you know, reading a bit, looking at a few forums, that kind of thing. But, you know, a lot of the forums gave me the same bullshit, you know, that, oh, yeah, I mean, 20 years, you know, the alcohol voice will still be there and you can still, you know, succumb to it and you're never away from it and one drink is going to bring you back and, you know, all that bullshit, you know. And that scared me at the beginning because I didn't realise what bullshit it was because I had no experience of it. And I think that's a problem with most people, is that in the beginning they just haven't got that experience of what it's like to quit, you know, what it's like to build up the self-confidence day by day that you can do this, what it's like to turn your back on alcohol, push yourself into a direction that is away from alcohol. But once you start getting that experience and you start pushing yourself forwards and you start achieving the goals in your life that you thought weren't possible, or you start achieving them faster than you thought they were possible, then you start believing in yourself and you start thinking, well, I am achieving this on my own. You know, I'm doing this on my own. Why did I ever listen to that, you know? But it's a natural thing for us humans to do, to listen to, to listen to other people who we think have got some knowledge. The problem with the internet and with the world that we live in today is there's just such a vast amount of knowledge that it's very difficult to pick apart which is good knowledge and which is bad knowledge, which is knowledge that's going to be helpful to you and which knowledge is going to be detrimental to you. Another false fact is that people think that you're going to get help from your family and friends. Sometimes that's just not the case. I mean, the problem with a lot of family and friends is that they are also drinkers, and there's no point in asking another drug user how to overcome the problems of your drug use while they're still using the drug. It's pointless. It's the same thing with, I find, which is hypocritical about a lot of researchers, because a lot of researchers are drinkers themselves, and therefore they're trying to justify their own drinking. Maybe not in a specific scientific research project that they're doing, but at the end of the day, below the surface, they've got an ulterior motive, or they've just got a conflict of interest. So and that goes with your family and your friends. At the end of the day, the only person that you can truly 100% rely on is yourself. As I say, 100% responsibility, 100% commitment. That's what it takes. And to fly in the face of opinion, of popular opinion, this is what we're doing. People around us are swallowing this poison on a daily basis, killing their bodies on a daily basis, and it's culturally accepted to do that. But in order for us to stop doing that, you have to fly against that. You have to go against many of your peers, and sometimes that is going to create a conflict. So you've got to have not only the tenacity to overcome your own weaknesses and your own cravings and wants, and to push through the different symptoms that you're getting, the sleeplessness and all that kind of stuff, and push through all that. But you've also got this obstacle put in your way by other people who really might not want to see you succeed, but they don't understand what you're talking about. The only way that they can rationalize it themselves is to say, well, yeah, you must have a drinking problem. So that's my experience with family and friends. And I'm not saying anybody, I don't think any of my family or friends had any motives which are detrimental towards me. But at the end of the day, whether their motives were detrimental or not, their advice, in some cases was definitely detrimental, or could have been if I'd chosen to listen to it. The fifth false fact that I want to highlight is that quitting drinking will cure all your problems, that if you do quit drinking, that everything else is going to be good. And it's just not the fact. I mean, quitting drinking is the start of the process of building, rebuilding, whatever you want to call it, of moving forwards and getting something new in your life, of trying new things and failing at a lot of things on your way, trying new things again, failing at more things. But it's a lot of hard work, but it's well worth it. Every step of the way is well worth it, because every step that you take forwards, you're putting another step between you and your old behavior. And that's the whole point of this thing, it's just to put more and more distance between you and the behavior, right? The sixth part of this is that, people talk about, you've got to rebuild yourself. And I just said it there, right? But it's not a rebuild from the sense that you are broken, right? You're not a broken person. It's just a part of your life happens to have become habitual around the drug, right? And I don't like to think that in the sense of it, alcohol is not normal. It's not normal to put this shit into your body in the first place, right? Just as it's not normal for people to overeat to the extent that people are overeating these days. But that is a product of the society that we're raised in, right? And it's very easy to see, it's very easy to do. You know, it's very easy to sort of see how people become habitually sort of addicted to, or they become habitually reliant on, dependent on a drug, whether it's alcohol or cigarettes or fat, sugar, salt, whether it's cocaine or heroin, whatever it is, you know, it's easy to see how this can come about. And it doesn't mean to say that you are a broken person, right? You might have things in your life that are broken, parts of your life that are broken, but you, as an individual, you need to rebuild things from a perspective of rethinking things and rebuilding, as I say, things outside of yourself, rebuilding parts of your life, learning new skills, relearning old skills that you've forgotten about. And, you know, this is a very, very dynamic process, right? It's not something which is static. It's not something which is going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time for it to happen, but it will get there. So, look, that's it for today. If you need any help at all, you know, we've got a great website over at alcoholmastery.com. There's over 600 videos, absolutely free, which is a good archive for just all different types of help, from the trying to help you with the, you know, day-to-day getting through this alcohol thing, you know, quitting alcohol, moving onwards from alcohol, you know, how to move away from alcohol and leave the alcohol behind you, inspirational stuff, you know, stuff to really big up your determination and motivate you onwards. So until next time, my name's Kevin O'Hara for alcoholmastery.com. Take care of yourself, keep the alcohol out your mouth and stay safe. Onwards and upwards. Hey, good luck to you. Bye now.